My name is Amanda McKee. I am the Director for Knowledge and Learning with the NDC Partnership Support Unit, and it's my pleasure today to welcome you to this August session of our Raising Ambition Through Partnership series focused on inclusion and implementation of coastal wetland targets in NDCs. So today's event is part of a series that's hosted jointly by the NDC Partnership, GIZ, UNDP, and WRI to highlight successful examples of mitigation and adaptation ambition-raising efforts and really emphasize the learning that's taken place to help scale impact across the membership. This series is a platform for dialogue, both across NDC Partnership members and beyond, to expand, deepen, and build upon these efforts and expertise, including as countries work on long-term low-emission development strategies and work towards their next round of NDC update. Before we begin, I want to go over just a few quick housekeeping notes. So first of all, we are pleased to offer interpretation for today's session into both Spanish and French. If you'd like to listen to the webinar in one of these languages, please follow the instructions on the screen. So at the bottom of your Zoom window, you can click on the globe icon to access the interpretation settings. And once you click on the interpretation icon, a pop-up window will appear showing you the available languages. You can select your preferred language from the list. To hear the interpretation clearly, we recommend that you mute the original audio to avoid the overlapping sound. And you can do this simply by clicking Mute Original Audio option. In addition, we really encourage your participation in today's session. So you can use the chat function through Zoom to share comments, to share links to resources, or to engage with other participants. We also encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat, including your organization and the country that you're joining from, so we know who's with us today. If you have questions for the panelists, you can use the Q&A function, ask your question through there, and then the panelists will answer them, either responding through the Q&A feature or live. All of the material from today's session, including the PowerPoint presentation and any highlighted resources, will be shared by email following the event. And lastly, please note that this session is being recorded for future reference and will be shared on the NDC Partnership's YouTube channel. And so by participating in the session, you are consenting to being recorded. So with that, I'm pleased to kick off today's session, which will discuss inclusion and implementation of coastal wetland NDC targets. With an increasing number of countries, including commitments to protect and restore blue carbon coastal wetland ecosystems, this is really a timely topic, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the experiences of the panelists that we have joining us today. We are organizing today's session jointly with PEW. So we're very excited to have them on board and to hear their expertise that they're bringing throughout this discussion today. When we discuss blue carbon, we're referring to the vast reservoirs of carbon that are stored within coastal and marine ecosystems. So this includes mangroves, seagrasses, tidal marshes. Incorporating blue carbon in NDCs can enhance the effectiveness of a country's climate action plan. And it can also help to further their SDG delivery and alignment. By recognizing and valuing blue carbon, nations can also substantially increase their potential to achieve emission reduction targets and contribute to global climate goals. We know that coastal ecosystems have great carbon sequestration potential and provide vital services like shoreline protection, fisheries support, and habitat preservation. So by investing in their conservation and restoration, countries can simultaneously address climate change while safeguarding local livelihoods and biodiversity. Enhancing NDC commitments and protecting and restoring coastal ecosystems can amplify parties' contributions to carbon sequestration, can promote sustainable development, foster global cooperation, create a more resilient and balanced climate approach. And I'm excited to hear from our panelists today and look forward to hearing from their experiences. So to get started, I'm going to hand it to my colleague, Sarah Wolf from the NDC Partnership Support Unit, who's going to walk us through the agenda for today and also to present some trends on the types of requests for support that the NDC Partnership is receiving related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts. And so, Sarah, I turn it over to you.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Amanda. My name is Sarah Wolf. I'm Knowledge Management Associate with the NDC Partnership Support Unit. And I'm going to start, like Amanda said, by introducing the agenda for today's session. So I'll first give a summary of trends in requests for support through the NDC Partnership related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts. We'll then have a presentation of Costa Rica's blue carbon experience from Jacqueline Rivera Wong, National Wetlands Program Coordinator for the government of Costa Rica in the CNAC, National System of Conservation Areas. Then a presentation of Panama's blue carbon experience from Tanya Romero, researcher at Panama's Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, followed by Kim Jensen, manager at PEW Charitable Trusts, who will give an introduction to PEW's coastal wetlands work and the partner perspective of the NDC updating process. We'll then have 14 minutes for discussion and Q&A before we close. Next slide, please. From our engagement in close to 90 countries, the NDC Partnership has amassed an immense database on country support needs for NDC implementation. And this information is stored in the Knowledge NOOK, or NOOK, the partnership's knowledge management system. The NOOK catalogs country requests to the partnership and the support being offered and delivered against them. The NOOK system is accessible to all members upon requests, and users can read through nearly 5,000 individual requests stored in the system and search through the requests by various fields, which include country, region, sector, key topic, type of support, and activity type. So the picture you see here on the right is of the dashboard in the NOOK, which provides visualizations of trends within these categories and more. The NOOK really allows the support unit and members to draw out insights and conduct pieces of analysis that help share trends with partners and support partners to shape their support offerings. So the support unit produces insight briefs analyzing country requests and support offerings across specific thematic trends, as well as country impact briefs, which summarize unique examples and lessons learned at the country level. So the data I'm presenting today comes from an insight brief on blue carbon, oceans, and coasts that the NDC Partnership Support Unit is currently co-developing with colleagues at the PEW Charitable Trusts. I want to mention that we hold monthly trainings on the NOOK platform for members, and the next is Wednesday, September 13th. So please reach out to me if you'd like to receive the training invitation. I'll be sure to share my contact information in the chat, and I hope to see many of you there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I will be presenting trends in countries' support needs and support gaps related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts. The analysis reflects data that was in the NOOK as of July this year, which is important to note because the data in NOOK is constantly updated based on new requests for support and new commitments of support from partners. It's also important to note that the support unit recently audited the data in NOOK to identify those requests for which governments are still seeking support and those which can be considered inactive. So for the purpose of this analysis, inactive requests have been archived in the NOOK to ensure that the data presented is as accurate as possible. Because of the various tags we use, there are a lot of ways to filter and analyze the data. For this analysis, we used the key topic filter, oceans and coasts, which captures requests that can be broader than simply blue carbon coastal wetlands requests. This tag is defined as including at least one of the following: protecting and restoring oceans and coastal ecosystems, covering coastal zones where sea and land processes occur, using the sustainable development of the ocean as an engine for sustainable economic growth, or blue economy. Since blue carbon coastal wetlands are an essential aspect of these outlined areas, The data presented in this analysis is referred to from here on out as blue carbon, oceans, and coasts. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in recent years, the NDC Partnership has seen an influx of requests from country members seeking support to address blue carbon and other needs related to oceans and coasts within their NDC implementation or enhancement priorities. There are 183 active requests for support related to blue carbon, oceans, and coasts submitted between 2018 and now, representing 4% of all active requests in NOOK. While only 7% of these 183 requests explicitly mention blue carbon, more than half mention the following key terms: mangroves, seagrass, coastal areas, marine, coastal wetlands, coastal communities, coastal resilience, and beaches. These 183 requests come from 25 countries across all regions in the world, but 73% of the requests come from 3 countries: Belize, Sao Tome and Principe, and Tunisia. You'll see the table on the right, which lists all 25 countries and the number of active blue carbon, oceans, and coasts requests from each country. More than half of the requests come from small island developing states or Alliance of Small Island States. Next slide, please. To provide a better understanding of the granular detail within the requests for support that the NOOK data represents, I'm sharing 4 examples of the detailed requests for support received from countries. The first 2 requests here from Tunisia and Sao Tome and Principe represent the more general oceans and coasts topic. Tunisia requested support to design and implement an evaluation that will inform the Coastal Protection and Development Agency's Coastal Adaptation Action Plan. This request is still seeking support. Sao Tome and Principe requested support to improve fisheries management in vulnerable communities by building small marinas and structures for boat moorings. This request has been supported. The second 2, from Belize and Papua New Guinea, represent blue carbon specific requests. Belize requested support to enhance the capacity of the country's mangrove and seagrass ecosystems to act as a carbon sink and strengthen adaptation and resilience benefits by expanding mangrove protection and restoration efforts. This was partially supported. The request from Papua New Guinea, also partially supported, was support to build capacity to assess and account for the country's blue carbon sequestration potential by assessing and accounting for carbon stocks and emission factors in mangroves, salt marshes, and seagrass meadows. So hopefully this provides a little bit more detail of what the content of the request is behind the data that I'm about to present. Next slide, please. We see here that the support status of the 183 blue carbon, oceans, and coasts requests can be broken down into various categories. 37% of the requests are either fully or partially supported, which is lower than the average support rate across all active requests in NOOK. This means that 63% of the blue carbon, oceans, and coast requests are still seeking support. Within these unsupported requests, over half are from within countries' NDC implementation plans or partnership plans, which reflect more comprehensive requests and deeper support needs. As a result, it can take months or even years for partner support to be officially committed to requests from this mechanism. We can also break the support gap data down to identify trends within key categories. Of those blue carbon, oceans, and coast requests related to a specific sector, the most common have the largest support gaps. Focusing support on these sectors, so fisheries, water, and related tourism, would enable coastal countries to harness the adaptation and mitigation potential of their natural environments. Looking below at support gaps within the key topics tag, those blue carbon, oceans, and coast requests tagged with gender equality have the lowest support rate. Only 6 of these requests are tagged with gender equality, but it's essential to highlight that gender equality is an integral aspect of support to countries and to the success of blue carbon initiatives. There's a significant gap in support for key topics and activity types related to climate finance, which are some of the most common within blue carbon oceans and coasts requests. So looking at key topic finance and investment, this is the third most common within these requests, but has the second highest support gap. Looking at the breakdown by activity type on the upper right-hand side, preparing bankable projects and pipelines is the second most common activity type amongst these requests, and 71% of these requests remain unsupported. This underpins the point that support for these requests is essential to ensure the sustainability of blue carbon initiatives. Many countries are still working to develop mechanisms and frameworks to measure emissions from blue carbon ecosystems, but many struggle to attract support to implement this work. Looking at the value chain of service support gap on the bottom right-hand side, M&E, or monitoring and evaluation, is the category with the highest gap in support. I'll now hand over to Jacqueline Rivera Wong, National Wetlands Program Coordinator for the Government of Costa Rica in the CNAC, National System of Conservation Areas. Jacqueline, over to you.
Muchísimas gracias, Sara. Y voy a hacer esta introducción en español y luego voy a cambiar en inglés. Quisiera agradecer a todos los organizadores. Realmente el equipo de PEW y el NDC Partnership han sido colaboradores de Costa Rica en el proceso junto con otros aliados, y me siento muy feliz de poder compartir la experiencia de Costa Rica, que no es solo a nivel gubernamental, sino el resultado del trabajo en coordinación con muchísimos ONGs, academias y las mismas comunidades. Entonces, espero poder compartirles lo mayor posible en el tiempo que tengo disponible en la siguiente diapositiva. Costa Rica's commitment for this webinar is disculpen que me escucho escucho el sonido para todo el mundo, entonces voy a bajar aquí. So Costa Rica's commitment for this webinar is to share our experience telling the story. And telling the story is very important for us, based on the process for the construction of the National Blue Carbon Strategy, which has presented in the last February this year. But the story doesn't not start here. It began a few years ago, around 10 or 11 years, when scientists like our partners in Costa Rica began measuring the carbon stock up to 3 meters deep in the ground. At the time, very few crazy people spoke of blue carbon in this moment. In the next slide, we can today we can share this scheme with you, but it has really mean a lot of work, including the Costa Rica's government, academia, coastal communities, and NGOs, not forgetting international cooperation, of course. One of the left side of the screen, you can see how national and international commitments, such as the National Decarbonization Plan, the first of this kind in the region, and the NDCs are used as a political framework to give strength and advance the blue agenda in our country. And the interesting thing is that we decided that it would be related to the national report for the UNCCC, which is turned in feed by the National Inventory of Greenhouse Gases. And you will wonder when I will start talking about the blue carbon. When? Well, we need to wait a little more for give you this introduction information. To continue the story, none of this would make sense without the carbon stock data, and this is very important, which allowed us to build the specific allometric equation for our mangrove species. At the same time, national interest began at the government level to stop the loss of mangroves and start a part of restoration of blue carbon ecosystem based on science and not only on reforestation. The management of blue carbon ecosystems and the interinstitutional network begin to improve. The results of this project visualize the need to start ecological monitoring, link it with the National Forest Inventory Report, and we are currently working to apply the IPCC Wetland Supplement. That is a very confused technical tool. A clear example that we cannot advance alone is the support of the U.S. Embassy, for example, in Costa Rica, which through an acceleration project that includes NOAA, for example, we are improving the capacities to apply this supplement and thus avoid double counting of emission of removal of carbon dioxide emission related to mangroves. As you can see, the gray boxes in the chart indicate the strategic objective of the blue carbon strategy, including the development of financial mechanisms, and these may or may not be economical. The fair distribution of the benefits of blue carbon ecosystem is the key to the sustainability of restoration and conservation actions. Not market mechanisms and results-based payment are the different option which we can provide financial sustainability. The placement of blue carbon credits in the voluntary market is not the only option, and it is not useful for all countries either. This is a lesson that we learn in this process, and it's very important to share with you that every country needs to find the better way and analyze very carefully the information and how and if each country are prepared to give this step. Some of you may know the success of the payment for ecosystem services that is applied in private forests in Costa Rica. The reality is that our mangroves are part of the state's natural heritage and can apply for the Environment Services Payment Program. This situation has made us advance in the creation of a proposal that seeks to recognize community work related to ecological restoration process in degraded mangroves in Costa Rica. One lesson we have learned is that we can decide when we are ready to put carbon credits on the market. A clear example is that we continue to receive purchase offers, but we can't clear enough to explain to organizations around the world that we are not yet ready for the voluntary market, but if they want to support us to stop the loss of degradation of mangroves, they are welcome. And this too is our principal learn about this process, because we need to put attention in our main objective, that is conservation and stop the loss in the mangrove, and not necessarily sell credits carbon in the market. The message we want to share is that the most important thing is not to sell of carbon units. The most important thing is the conservation of blue carbon ecosystems and their restoration, so that they can be able option of the menu of ecosystem-based solution to the climate crisis we have today. In the next slide, we can see a reference of Ramsar Convention. This is to a very important part of this story. We cannot forget the framework of action of the Ramsar Convention, recently in 2018, the contracted parties approved resolution 13.14. It is relation on promoting conservation, restoration, and sustainable management of coastal blue carbon ecosystems. Part of my work in Costa Rica is be a focal point, national focal point for Ramsar Convention, and this opportunity give me the chance to know and go deeper to the knowledge in the Ramsar Convention and how this can vinculate or improve the work, the national work based in the blue carbon agenda. On many occasions, the implementation of the commitments of the convention, such as UNCCC, the Paris Agreement, CBD, can be somewhat difficult, and that is why the results of the Ramsar Convention can be a little more clear and easy to translate the international commitment into practice. And in the next information, you can read on this slide the action that is the case of Costa Rica. We have applied in practice, but that were endorsed within the framework of the convention, of the Ramsar Convention. This allowed us to position the priority of action in contrast of other action and make it easier for our allies to search for resources. And in the next slide, I will try to summarize in 6 points how to start this process and how we can put in a slide our experience. And we need results in the fields of ecological restoration pilot projects. This is for us and our experience, the first steps that we need to improve technical and scientific data to support the rest of the steps in this plan. It is relevant to have technical tools to apply comprehensive ecological monitoring in mangroves that include the specific protocols to measure carbon, and updated map that identify priorities areas will be useful for assigning restoration projects. Interest communities actively working on ecological restoration. After this, the time will come to develop the financial mechanisms that allowed us to make a fair distribution of the benefits. And we're almost finished. And this last but not least is to tell our story. There are different communication tools. This is one of them. We can easily use them on social networks and social media. And the results of good communication is that someone from Costa Rica crossed the world to reach Paris, Fiji, and China, and continue telling the story. This because sometimes we forget the importance of the communication tools. And finally, I want to share with you this beautiful message that I take with me from the Pacific Island. I love this mission because it's part of our main objective and remind me why not forget, not lose the principle of the main objective related with our work. So let me read it. We, as a Pacific voyagers, are on a journey sailing to an island in the future, navigating by the values of our ancestral past. Our ancestors understood that the health of the ocean reflects the health of the people. When we truly acknowledge this insight, when we are aware of these extensive threats to the ocean, and when we care about the future of our children, the only logical step is to create a new vision, a sustainable sail plan based on values of interconnected, respected, and steward. Thank you so much for your attention, and let me introduce Tania Romero. Tania Romero is our next panelist, and she is a researcher at the Panama's Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. And thank you, Tania, for sharing your experience with us.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thanks for the invitation to this webinar. Today I will present Coastal Wetlands NDC Target Panama Review. My name is Tania Romero, and I work for Smithsonian Tropical Institute together with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center and PEW Charitable Trusts. We are working together to improve the Panama NDC target for coastal wetland. Next. Panama has reached to the carbon negative status due to the forest sector negative emission reported in the previous NDC. That simply means that between all the sectors considered for the national greenhouse gas inventory, the forest sector removed more CO2 from the atmosphere than what is emitted by other sectors. In the country, 99% of the forest is considered native, and that includes the mangroves due to the forest country definition. And we also consider that all the forests are under a kind of management. Before that Panama aimed to restore around 50,000 hectares by 2050, and also with the intention to increase the absorption to 2.6 million CO2 equivalent. That means that 10% of the average value reported in the first NDC will increase by 10%. And will keep the country status of zero negative carbon emission. But also, the country will start implementation of the RED Plus strategy by 2025. As you will see at this point, please next slide. We just has a previous status of the NDC, but by the update on 2020, officially the blue carbon ecosystem are included in the NDC as a mangrove and seagrasses and wetlands. However, other wetlands are under. There is not enough data to in the previous greenhouse gas inventory, and that includes seagrasses. Peatland. We have a lot of information, especially in respect to the coverage in the Pacific and the Caribbean. However, we have some other important information related with productivity, habitat use, and nutrients. In the case of the peatlands, where there is a lot of information that has been generated in the last few years, we need to figure out how they will be included in the next coming on NDC update for the country. And it's important also to mention that one of these peatlands, one is in the Caribbean, San Ponsat, has been studied for several years, but we have a new or is more recognized nowadays in the Pacific that could be one of the biggest for the region. And we already have some data there. Nevertheless, the country already has information for the total ecosystem carbon stocks for mangroves using a proof methodology. I need to be just applied. So in synthesis, the country needs more future work in synthesized information related with the coastal wetlands to be included. For the country, the coastal wetlands are really important. As you see in our first NDC, part of the contribution to the next emission condition probably comes from the mangroves. And we also have a very strong relationship with the coastal area and mangrove because part of our fishery is recognized to be associated with the important services of the mangrove. In terms of citizen, it perceives is an economic value for the well-being. Additionally, there is awareness of the value of mangrove in the climate change regulation, a barrier against strong surge and sea level rise. In terms of organization, most of the local community in the countryside use mangroves as another sources of income. They can extract some products like mangrove cockle or blue lamp crab, but also they are trying to use the mangroves not just as area to extract it, but also as a area to implement some activities like a tourism where the impact to the area will be less harmful. So in terms of the implementation of blue carbon in the NDC, as I mentioned before, the report doesn't mention any change between wetland to forest. Please, the following, thank you. Wetland to forest change or wetland to cropland change. So the report doesn't mention there is any change in this ecosystem between 1994 and 2007, as you see in the graph. But we have been getting some reduction because some activities. Next step. But next slide. But in the future, Panama has already set some targets for the NDC related with the coastal marine ecosystem. So they want to create a technical guide for the sector focused on adaptation and mitigation, and include the value that we have, especially for carbon, in the national greenhouse gas inventory, and by 2025, a technical restoration manual for mangrove. So the actions to achieve these targets are through the monitoring of seagrass and coral reefs, the national plan for marine garbage, the incentives to develop marine blue economy project, and also restoration of wetland, focused mainly in mangroves, and the natural-based solution strategy. Blue carbon ecosystem local benefit. Yeah, the country recognized, the population recognized the value as a coastal erosion protection and against strong surge and sea level rise. But as I mentioned, part of our gross domestic product is quite relevant in terms of fishery and agriculture that coming from the mangrove in this case. And also, already we are seeing some relevant income coming from the application of the ecological tourism to this kind of ecosystem. Next. In terms of governance, we have our national wetland inventory that need to be updated. We have our presently for wetland policy, our policy for ocean and biodiversity, and different management instruments. But we have a challenge by competing governmental agenda and policy implementation gaps. So we must implement and inform management plans and fostering regular communication and collaboration between all the stakeholders in the country. Next. So the country needs some steps to map their coastal wetland and the carbon assessment. So it's important for the country to map other wetlands as a seagrass and peatland, create and implement a monitor management plan of the coastal marine special management area and protection area, increase the community participation, and manage the anthropogenic pressure. In terms of carbon assessment, train local stakeholders, improves the monitoring for the forest management practice in mangrove, like with extraction, agriculture, removal, salt production, and others, and also include when those lands have been passed to another activity. We have to update the mangrove forest and soil map also for the country to be able to use our data, local data, to increase our time of data to tier 2. So in general, it's important to include the local stakeholder in different levels, community, academia, research, and local government agencies. Next. With that, I just want to mention that Panama is making the step, but need to increase the local communication and participation. Thank you. So now I want to introduce Kim Jensen, manager at PEW Charitable Trusts.
Hi, thanks, Tanya. And hi, everyone. Just as a reminder, if you have a question for the participants, please just type it into the chat and we'll be getting to the Q&A section shortly. But as a reminder, everyone, my name is Kim Jensen. I am a manager with PEW's Protecting Coastal Wetlands and Coral Reefs project. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today about the role of NGOs and other non-governmental partners and how they can help in the NDC updating process. So many thanks again for joining us today. As a bit of background, PEW is a US-based nonprofit organization that was founded in 1948. We work on a wide range of environmental issues, including coastal wetlands as part of this team that I'm a part of, the Protecting Coastal Wetlands and Coral Reefs project, which was launched in 2019. Our team seeks to support countries in strengthening the capacities necessary to include commitments to protect and restore countries' coastal wetlands within their climate commitments in their nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. We focus on coastal wetlands for many of the reasons that our previous speakers talked about. They help sequester carbon, and they're critical for climate adaptation as well, such as protecting communities from storm surge and stabilizing shorelines. Our work frequently engages in the blue carbon mitigation benefits of these ecosystems, but it's not limited to it. We recognize that for many communities, the adaptation benefits of coastal wetlands is often the most important aspect of them. As part of our work, we provide research, policy, and technical support in collaboration with research and policy partners, one of which, the Smithsonian, you already heard from. Next slide, please. In phase 1 of our work, we worked with the World Wildlife Fund and Smithsonian in Belize. As part of that work in Belize, we worked as well with the University of Belize, government partners, local NGOs, and others to carry out the country's first above and below ground carbon assessment of mangroves. The data from that carbon assessment is now in the process of being incorporated into the country's national inventory. As part of that effort, specifically with the mangrove carbon assessment, we worked on training around carrying out comprehensive mangrove carbon assessment with local partners. We understand that the country already has many fantastic nonprofit organizations that are already working on this issue, and we were very happy to be able to help provide that specific capacity strengthening activity. In Costa Rica, we worked with Conservation International and CATIE. As you've already heard from Jacqueline, the focus here was on developing an accurate baseline habitat map for mangroves to inform conservation targets. And then we also helped with a technical framework for the Payment for Marine Ecosystems program that the government is now taking forward as part of its NDC implementation efforts. And in Seychelles, we worked with SECAT and Oxford University. Our work in Seychelles was around focusing on completing the country's first field verified map of the country's entire EEZ. There, we were fortunate to not only work with Oxford and SECAT, as I mentioned, but also the University of Seychelles, Island Conservation Society, the German Aerospace Agency, as well as others. There as well, we also did carry out some capacity strengthening activities with many of the wonderful local partners on the ground around training for seagrass mapping and then carbon assessment of seagrass as well. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see many of the great coastal wetland commitments by our 3 initial country partners that we worked with, Belize, Seychelles, and Costa Rica. I won't read through them directly, but as you can see, these are really bold, specific, and measurable commitments to coastal wetlands. Many countries recognized the potential of coastal wetlands in their 2020-2021 NDC updating. However, few were able to include targets that were this specific and measurable. The focus for us really was moving the needle in that recent NDC update in order to push forward coastal wetlands and their conservation and restoration. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work with each of these countries and each of our policy and research partners. Next slide, please. We're now moving to phase 2 of our project, which commenced in April 2022 and is running until at least April 2026. In this effort, we have 3 main pillars. First, implementation, working with those 3 initial country partners around the implementation of the coastal wetland sections of their NDC. Second, expansion, expanding to at least 5 new countries across 2 regions, Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Western Indian Ocean, as part of this upcoming 2025 NDC update. And then third, looking at the regional approach to ensure that other countries can include coastal wetlands within their NDCs. We really want to be able to scale the impact of our country projects by supporting and elevating the work through regional and international forums. NDCs are always going to be nationally determined, so the core of our work will still remain on nationally determined work and national level partnerships. However, we understand that many countries are looking to include coastal wetlands in their NDCs. They share similar ambitions and there are similar needs. So we will be conducting regional trainings as part of this effort. I know there's many country partners on this call. So if you are a country that is located in either of those regions and you would be interested in receiving more information about some of those trainings, please feel free to email me or my colleague Annalise, who's going to be helping with the moderation of this. Our contact information is at the end of this presentation. And then finally, we'll also be working to complete a seagrass map of the Western Indian Ocean with field verification in 4 countries: Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, and Kenya. Next slide, please. So finally, as I mentioned, there are some great opportunities for NGOs and other interested organizations to be engaged in this NDC revision process. And I know there's many of our partner organizations and other NGOs as well on this call who are doing great work around the NDC revision process. Countries can really utilize NGOs like PEW and others to provide research support as requested by governments and to conduct trainings and strengthen local capacity where necessary. There are a few key takeaways that we have found from our work. First, there are common aspects between NDCs, but there's no one-size-fits-all approach because NDCs are always going to be nationally determined. So NGOs that are engaging in the NDC revision process should make sure that they are engaging with government and other interested stakeholders at the earliest stage of a project to make sure that any outputs are additive and helpful to what the government is trying to accomplish. And second, NGOs should seek to build partnerships focused on strengthening long-term, durable, in-country capacity to meet implementation needs, including financing needs, which we understand is going to be critical to the implementation process. I want to say thanks to everyone for joining this call again. Please, if you have any questions, put them into the chat and we will look to answer as many questions as possible. I want to now turn over to my colleague, Annalise Simmer, Principal Associate for the Protecting Coastal Wetlands and Coral Reefs Project at PEW. Annalise, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kim. And thank you to both Jacqueline and Tanya for your wonderful presentations. I learned so much and it's really great to have this opportunity to hear about your country's experiences. So now we are going to open up to a discussion. I have some questions that I'd love to ask you, and then if we have time, we can take some audience questions. So the first question, and one thing I noted from your presentations, is that you both mentioned the importance of national wetland inventories and how both of your countries are working on your respective national wetlands inventories. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to briefly share and connect the dots for our audience about how wetland inventories are very useful and important for achieving a country's NDC goals. And either both of you can answer that or just one.
Yeah, okay, I will answer For Panama, it's very important to update the national wetlands inventory because it's going to give you the database or baseline to make this future decision about where to implement conservation program or management program. So you really can protect or make decisions on their resources that you really don't know how big or small they are and in which condition they are.
Thank you, Tanya. Jacqueline, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sí, voy a hablar en español, aprovechando que tenemos la traducción simultánea. Quisiera complementar lo que Tania ya nos ha compartido y volver a hacer hincapié en muchas de las facilidades que nos da el marco de la Convención de Ramsar. Recordemos que cuando hablamos de ecosistemas, reservorios de carbono azul, básicamente la totalidad son humedales y la convención es, además de una de las convenciones, la convención con más antigüedad implementándose, también es la única convención que se focaliza en un ecosistema específico como son los humedales. Entonces, esto nos da la facilidad a las partes contratantes, a los países que hemos ratificado la adhesión a la convención, de tener muchísimas herramientas técnicas que son el enlace entre el cumplimiento de objetivos o compromisos internacionales y nuestras políticas nacionales. Esto me parece que es clave y que la obligación o el compromiso que nos manda la Convención de Ramsar para que los países tengan su inventario nacional de humedales completo y además el acompañamiento que puede hacer la Secretaría de la Convención y sus órganos de gobernanza, como es el grupo de expertos técnico y científico, es un apoyo que no deberíamos de estar dejando de lado, sino que, bueno, yo los invito a que se acerquen a sus puntos focales nacionales o a sus representantes regionales en el Comité Permanente de la Convención, porque es un espacio que nos puede ayudar muchísimo a todos los países, independientemente del nivel que estemos con la inclusión de estos ecosistemas en las NDCs. Hay varias resoluciones específicas relacionadas a ecosistemas de carbono azul y el marco de los compromisos de la Convención Marco de Cambio Climático, incluyendo las NDCs y el Acuerdo de París. Entonces, sería mi aporte a esta pregunta.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Very helpful. We have some questions from the audience, so I'm going to go to this one about data availability. I'm wondering, this person, Spencer Thomas, asks, could you expand on issues related to data availability in small states for NDC monitoring of progress, and how countries might be able to move forward with NDC implementation or monitoring in cases when a full data set for blue carbon ecosystems is not yet available? Do you have any advice?
Perdón, Annelies, perdí la primera parte de la pregunta.
That's okay. I'll summarize it a little bit shorter. Do you have advice for countries that want to include coastal wetlands in their NDCs, but there are limitations to data? Any advice for how to still include them in NDCs, but without the data available?
Bueno, esto es un reto. Eso es un reto y es un espacio de análisis por cada país, pero lo más importante es tener claridad sobre los antecedentes de política nacional que pueda tener en el tema de conservación. Recordemos que lo más importante para la NDC es ir aumentando el compromiso y el compromiso tiene que ser medible. Entonces, en Costa Rica, la experiencia y realmente el trabajo que se ha hecho nos ha enseñado con algunos golpes, tal vez, pero nos ha enseñado a que mientras mejor tengamos la información técnica, es más fácil esa medición. No todos los ecosistemas son fáciles de medir. Un claro ejemplo es las turberas. Les comparto que Costa Rica hasta este momento y después de muchos años de búsqueda es que está dando el paso número 1 para poder identificar sus turberas costeras. Entonces, tener la información disponible no siempre es fácil y no siempre es rápido, pero el primer paso es insistir en que el cumplimiento de las políticas, independientemente de cuáles sean en cada uno de los países y con sus dimensiones diferentes, debe de estar asociado a una medición, a cómo medir que estamos realmente cumpliendo, a cómo medir que estamos realmente subiendo una ambición, aumentando una ambición. Y la forma idónea es por medio de la información técnica, ¿verdad? Puede ser algo tan fácil como una primer revisión por sensores remotos de áreas que cubren estos ecosistemas o pueden ser cosas complementarias muchísimo más específicas, pero sí la recomendación sería esa, que aunque no se tenga, insistir en que los compromisos que ya se tienen pueden ser medibles fácilmente y podemos llegar a tener mayor apoyo político, financiero y técnico en cuanto vayamos aumentando el nivel de información técnica disponible.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And thank you so much, Tanya. Unfortunately, we are so close to time, so we have to cut this short, but I love to see the amazing questions that are popping up in the chat and the Q&A. And with that in mind, I want to share a couple resources that are available that might actually answer some of these questions that are in the chat. So first, I want to share that we are working with NDC Partnership on an insight brief that will be published later this year. And also, there is a second edition of the Including Blue Carbon in NDCs guidance, which I'm going to share in the chat now, and that has more advice and answers to some of these questions. So finally, if we can give a great big virtual applause to our speakers. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, Tanya, and Kim for your presentations. And I'm going to quickly pass it to Sarah with NDC Partnership to close up with some logistical notes.
Thank you, Annalise. I want to echo the expression of gratitude to our panelists for their insightful contributions and engaged discussion. Today's webinar has been an excellent dive into the importance of inclusion and implementation of coastal wetland NDC targets, shedding light on key aspects of this work and fostering a deeper understanding. Particularly enjoyed hearing from Jacqueline about the importance of building communication tools to share Costa Rica's experience globally, and from Tanya about the local benefits of mangroves in Panama, including how community members are utilizing mangroves as sources of income. Please remember, the learning doesn't end here. Let's continue to explore, innovate, and collaborate as we approach the next round of NDC updates and further NDC implementation. The recording of the session will be available on the NDC Partnership YouTube channel, and you'll be able to access it within the next week. It will also be shared with you via the email you used to sign up for the session today. So do keep an eye out on the NDC Partnership website and social media for the announcement of the next session in this series. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to our continued exchange of ideas, and have a lovely rest of your day.